This is the story As Meat Loves Salt. Once upon a time there lived a king with his 3 daughters. Now the first 2 were terrible, but the last one was his favorite. And being a prudent man, he decided he needed to make a will to figure out who would inherit his kingdom. And so he did. But the 2 oldest daughters heard about it, and they went to bribe the lawyer, and there was a big scandal, and the king heard about it, and he said, "That's it. I have had it. Forget the will. I'm going to decide who inherits American Idol style." And he did. He gathered his daughters together. He said, "How much do you love me?" And the oldest one said, "As much as the world." And the second one said, "As much as life itself." And he turned to his youngest daughter, his favorite, and he said, "How much do you love me?" And she said, "As much as meat loves salt." And the king thought, "That's so plain, that's so wrong." And he was pissed off. So he went to his faithful servant. He said, "Take my youngest daughter into the woods and kill her." So the servant took her out into the woods, but she begged and pleaded so for her life that his heart was touched and he just couldn't do it. So instead, he told her when she got to the town and went to the castle, she could get a good job there if she gave his name. He was a reference. And then he took her dress and he went back to town and he went to the butcher shop and he got a deer's heart because he had to have proof to show her father. And this meant, of course, that the girl was running through the forest buck naked. This is rather inconvenient for her because it's bad enough being disinherited, having a hit put out on your life, without being naked on top of it. That's a real problem. But being industrious, she soon figured out that she could weave a dress of moss and a cloak of reeds and another cloak of boards. I think she had all 3 because it's an excellent way to stay warm and dry in the forest. So, she ate very well as well because all the birds and the bees literally heard that she was there, and being a decent person, they provided her with food and edible flowers, and she lived quite well. Now, many stories have it that when she came to the castle, that the castle did not know who she was, and neither did her family when they saw her again. And it makes you wonder, why didn't they know who she was? This is why. Now, she came to the outskirts of town, and there in the outskirts of town was the graveyard, because you just can't have your dead in town. It never turns out well. And there in the graveyard was the funeral of a 100-year-old woman. And after the funeral, she went to the gravedigger. She said, "Can I buy that old woman's skin from you?" And the gravedigger must have been used to odd requests like this, because he said, "Absolutely, but you must know there are 2 bonuses with this skin. The first is a magical wand. Now you wave this magical wand back and forth, and you can unzip the old woman's skin and step out of it. Now, the second thing you have to know about this old woman's skin is that it comes with a magical nut. Some stories say a magical box. Take that magical box, put it in the crook of that tree over there, and out will come magical clothing." And the girl said, "Thank you very much." She picked up the magical wand, stuck it in her bra. Being a bold woman, she could pull this off walking downtown. And where she shoved the magical box, no one knows. But she went off. I assumed that her clothing had no pockets. So she went off to town. She got a job at that castle when she mentioned the servant's name, and she became the castle's cook. And everyone at the castle knew, being 100 years old, when the party started at the castle, she was never going, she was so old. But what they didn't know is that every night, the girl would go out to the pond, wave the magical wand, unzip her old woman's skin, step out of it, and bathe in the pond. And one night, of course, the prince was out hunting at night, and he ran across her in the pond. And he didn't say, "Ah, there's an old woman's skin. I can steal it and bind her to me." No. He didn't know who she was, and he didn't see the old woman's skin. He just thought, "Ah, there's a lovely girl. I'd love to meet her." And the next day, he held a ball. Everyone came to the ball. And they all knew that the old woman who was the cook was so old she would never go. But what they didn't know is that the girl unzippered her old woman's skin at night and went to the magical tree. And she took the magical wand out of her bra and she put it aside. And she went to the tree and she took out the magical box. And she put it in the crook of the tree, and out popped a wonderful dress. What color this dress was, nothing says, but it was a lovely dress. And she put it on, hid her things away, went back to the castle, and danced with the prince every night of the dance. Now there were 3 nights to this dance, and the prince was in love. He thought this was wonderful. And every night the princess slipped away before he could declare how much he loved her, except for the last one. He gave her a ring. And he said, "If you don't marry me, I will die." But she slipped away anyway, with the ring. And the next day, the prince took to his bed, and he told everyone that he would die if he could not marry this girl. And rather than telling him to suck it up and get back to work, they all agreed that he would die. And so, the cook heard about this, and she went in the kitchen in her old woman's skin. And she made him barley gruel, because that's what they gave you when you were sick. They made you eat crap. And she went up the spiral staircase to the prince's room, carrying this barley gruel. And what he didn't know is that she had taken the ring that he'd given her, and she put it in his gruel. And so the prince ate the last of the barley gruel, scraping the side of the bowl, and he found the ring. And he wanted to know who had made the gruel, but she wouldn't tell him. He badgered her so much that she had to admit not only that she made the gruel, but who exactly she was, and that she was the girl that he had seen in the forest. And so he said, "I will marry you." And they set a wedding date. And as is traditional, they decided that they would have a grand party first, and a nice wedding reception. Might as well get that over with first before the wedding. So they invited everyone from all around the kingdom. They invited her father, they invited her sisters, they invited the servant that had helped her out in the woods, and they all went to the party. And the princess, in her old woman's skin, went to the kitchen and said, "Nothing for the feast shall be made with salt." And so it was. So the wedding guests came in, they said, "Oh, the house is decorated wonderfully, the seating arrangements are wonderful, this is so much fun. The food is awful." They all agreed it was the worst wedding reception they had ever been to. And so, her father did what anyone would do if he went to a restaurant that good, to an event that good, and the food was bad. He summoned the cook, and out she came in her old woman's skin. And he started going off on how terrible the food was, and she listened to him. And he looked at her, and he looked in her eyes, and he realized that she was his daughter. And he knew exactly then just what she meant when she said, "I love you as much as meat loves salt." And he started to cry. Now some people say that the prince had lost his mind while she was gone, and that she nursed him back to health, or that he had been deserted by his older children. And some things say that she had her sisters driven naked into the woods as she had been driven naked, or that they became old maids because that was the worst thing that could befall a woman at the time. But this all depends on how vindictive you want the princess to be. I think that she forgave her father at the dinner party. And a lot of places have it that she married the prince and she lived happily ever after, and that was the end of it, except for one. And this is what I think happened in that one story. The prince turned to her, he said, "Let's get married." And she said, "No, I don't want to marry you. Forget you. I want to marry him." She pointed to the servant, the one who helped her in the woods and saved her life. And the prince said, "You can't marry him. He's a servant." And she said, "So was I. And when I was a servant, nobody noticed me at all. And he was nice to me, and I like him." So she took her father by one hand. She took her future husband by the other hand. And she went off out the door. And I think that they lived happily ever after, selling the magical dresses that came out of that tree, and that everything worked out right for them in the end. Thank you very much for listening.